Nice. Okay, well, so if you want West Coast viewers, you need to pick a non-ungodly time.
Yes, this is true.
This is you guys.
Yeah.
Oh.
Welcome to my hell, man. I'm just like, but
Ian, are you in Europe? Is that why we actually have to do
Yes,
this
it's all Ian's fault.
It's all my fault.
Yeah.
What time is it there, Ian? Is it like a 4 p.m. or something?
It's a luxurious 4:30 p.m. right here.
Right.
Got to sleep in.
Yes.
Otherwise, I'm up till 4 or 5 in the morning with these guys, so we try to find the best time. But
where are they located?
Yeah, I'm in the south.
No, the guys you're working with, though.
Oh, yeah, the guys. Well, I work on California time actually. So
oh my God,
I have like 9 to 5 California thing going, but I live in Europe, so
you're squeezing us in before work, basically, is what you're saying.
Yes, exactly.
All right, fair enough. All right, let me. So we're live now, and I'm going to hit the record button. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and start.
Yeah.
So hello and welcome to the Enterprise Java Newscast. This is episode number 38 for December of 2017. And I'm here with my co-hosts, Ian Hlavats and Daniel Hinojosa. Hey, guys.
Hola.
Hey.
And today we have a special guest, Stephen Pousty, who is the head of...
Hey, the Steve-O.
The Steve Zero, right?
Oh, Steve Zero. Is that a zero?
Yeah,
because I'm leet like that, Daniel. I'm leet like that.
Yeah, see, you know what? Twitter doesn't have monospaced font, so I couldn't tell whether it was a zero.
It took me a minute looking at it, too. So,
oh, really?
So, yes, he's Steve Zero, the Steve Zero on Twitter.
Zero.
I can tell you that. Remember, I told you I can tell you lots of things. If you want to know the origin of the in front, I can give you that, too. Do you want it?
Sure.
Okay. So way back when, 2000 or something, you remember when when Firefox was Mozilla?
Yeah.
Yes.
And you remember when it came with an IRC client built in?
Yes.
I did. I don't remember.
So I was like, oh, what's this IRC thing? So I joined IRC. I become Steve Zero, right, as Steve-O before Jackass. And I'm sitting there and I'm on. And then one day I come on Freenode and it says that nick is taken. You can't use it. I was like, what is this? And so I reach out to whoever's Steve Zero, and I'm like, hey, I've been this for a while. And he's like, hey, you didn't claim the nick.
Right.
And I was like, all right, well, fine. You want to be Steve Zero? I'll be the Steve Zero. And that's hence the name. I got that inspiration from Superchunk. Did you guys ever know the group Superchunk, the musical group?
I've heard of them, but I don't really know what they sound like.
They got into a lawsuit with a group called Chunk, and they said, fine, we'll be Superchunk.
Ah, okay.
That's kind of like Vaver. So Java Slang is a project, and I think we talked about this on this show, that because they had the word Java in front of it, Oracle lawyers got all ugly about it and said, cease and desist, you cannot use the word Java, at least in the front of your project, because they haven't gone after RX Java, and you got to change that Java in your name. So they decided to call themselves Vaver, and if you go to the website, vavr.io, you'll see what they did. Because what they did is...
I remember that podcast, and I was laughing when I was like, nice.
Yeah.
Way to stick it to them.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty clever.
Yeah.
So, Steve, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Okay.
You don't have to talk the whole podcast about yourself, because
oh man, that's what I thought. That was just what you just introduced. Like, okay, this been doing Java a long time. Right now, I'm the director for developer advocacy for Red Hat JBoss middleware, and before that, at Red Hat, I was one of the lead developer evangelists for OpenShift, which is Red Hat's distribution of Kubernetes.
Mm-hmm.
And then done Java since about 2002. Before that, I got my PhD in ecology and my master's in forestry.
Right.
Wow, that's a big jump.
Yeah, it's another story, but we can save that for another time. If we
so, because of that, can you see the forest from the trees?
Always. That's why I'm here to educate you guys. I can actually see the forest for the trees. Actually, so when I give red monk talks or monkey grass talks, like, do you know those guys, the red monk guys? And they do that red monk show and monkey grass. Yeah, all my shows, Actually, I gave one at No Fluff Just Stuff, the nighttime one, which is like the mellow one.
Right.
I always use ecology analogies and try to teach people more ecology.
Oh, right. That's good.
That's cool. Very nice.
Yeah.
You have an aggressive recycling program in your house?
No, okay, now that is different than ecology. See, this is the thing that you'll say that'll piss off ecologists. That ecology is the science of the natural environment, which is actually a scientific discipline. Recycling and doing like, ooh, I care about all living things, not diametrically. That's not right. But it's totally different. It's not science. It's kind of something different. Orthogonal, maybe, yeah. Maybe. I mean, it's just not the same thing. Because I knew some people who were ecologists who actually, he's like, as long as I have frogs in the environment, I don't care about the rest of the stuff. And I was like, well, that's not very enlightened of you. But he's a scientist, so it doesn't matter.
Very good. Excellent.
Cool. So, Ian, what have you been up to?
Good question. Yeah, I've been, keeping busy, always trying to ramp up on the latest UI technologies. I managed to update the source code for my last book to Java 8, Java EE7, and Glassfish 4. That's the Prime Faces starter.
Cool.
There were some requests from the users to support that, so I did that. Very a smooth transition. There was not too many API breakages, which is very standard for Java and something we kind of take for granted, but always nice to see that.
Mm-hmm.
And just ramping up, working on some Docker stuff, some Java on Docker, lots of UI going on, Angular and Prime NG. And as I mentioned before we started, Daniel would be proud of me. I've recently been embracing the IntelliJ family of tools. So I'm working a lot with IntelliJ IDEA. I got some WebStorm going and app code. Really liking app code as an alternative to Xcode. So yeah, just keeping busy. I guess a little bit about my background. Like Stephen, I also actually started out, my undergrad degree was in philosophy, political science, and humanities. So, and from there I got into IT. So also coming from a non-technical background, jumping into technology with both feet. And I think it's helpful. I mean, Steve Jobs himself said he always pictured Apple at the crossroads of humanities and technology. So there's something to be said, I think, about bringing different, educational background to your job and to your projects. And as long as you have the passion, I think to learn, you can make it work. So things are good. Yeah, just keeping.
Plus,
busy,
you
guys.
know what? Politics is pretty boring nowadays, anyway. Nothing. Nothing to make your blood boil anymore. I mean, I think we all figured everything out when it comes to government and civics now. So
yeah, it's pretty peaceful. Everybody's getting along. Kumbaya.
That's right.
Definitely.
My favorite quote was somebody said that Donald Trump thought the internet was a naturally occurring phenomenon. I thought that was pretty cute.
All right.
All right. Daniel.
Kito is sweating like, no, what happened to my technical podcast?
No, I just don't want to get started.
Exactly. Let's just not.
No podcast left.
Please no. It's already polluted my Twitter stream. Like I tried to keep Twitter apolitical as long as possible, and this year I just couldn't do it anymore. Like it just feels. Never mind. I said I was going to stop. I'm stopping.
I actually have 2 accounts, and I'm not going. You could ask me personally what it is, but I'm definitely not putting it out on YouTube. So the question to me, just so that I could cleanse this podcast of all politicalness, although I'm a very very political person, but so things have been going really good. I'm officially done with 2017 as of yesterday, although I just have some bookkeeping chores and a few other things and a lot of studying. So this is the time right now that I have to hit the books. And it's amazing how many hours in reading and studying I still have to do at 45 years of age. Like, and so, if anyone's out there listening, or if you catch this a little later, one thing about software, as well as anything that you have, a lot of passion for, that requires, a lot of thinking, a lot of learning. That's just the nature of the thing. You'll never have to give up on studying, even if you're 45, 60, or 16. Really, it's really not going to matter. So that's what I have going on this winter. But just finished up my last class was an ACA Streams class over in Rochester, where it was effectively -7 and continually snowing in and out. And I'm surprised my air flight took off from that airport. That was just a sheet of ice.
So for all who don't know, Daniel actually lives in New Mexico, so I'm sure you were thrilled.
Yeah, and the week before that, saw Steve Zero over at Rich Web Experience, where I gave a handful of talks, but I did a full day Elm workshop, and it was amazing that I started at 9 and ended all the way at 6, and I still had more to talk about. So.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I get a little crazy, with the things that I love. So, did some Elm workshop. I did some legacy testing strategies and play framework, and I forgot. I think I did 2 more, but I forgot what they were. So, just probably some of my standard stock. Oh, an Elm work, just a regular Elm presentation as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It hasn't been that long since our last episode, so I'm doing a lot of the same stuff. Different projects with Angular and web components. I've got a side project that hopefully I'll get to talk about once it's further along. But for that, we're using Java in the back end and Polymer on the front end. And what was I going to say? Oh yeah. I also spoke at a conference there's a local conference here. I live in Richmond, Virginia, and they had their first RSVA, or what is it? RVA JavaScript conference, Richmond, Virginia JavaScript conference. And it was really nice. It was like a one-day conference locally, and I got to speak at it 15 minutes from my house. It's like the best conference ever.
Yeah, that's great.
But that was nice. It's good to do some more local networking and stuff.
Right. And then plus when you do things locally, you kind of look like a badass because no one really knows your extensive experience at times. You're like,
yes, especially if you're in a smaller market too.
Yeah,
if I lived back in New York City, I don't think it would seem nearly.
I know that guy or gal really just they speak really well. What's their secret?
Yes.
And then they're just like years of doing it. Cool. All right. Well, let me ask everyone a quick 1, 2, 3. And I don't mean for it to be very long, but top 3 technologies 2017.
Oh, nice question. Now, are these aren't new technology?
Just what were you focused on this past year? Name the top 3 technologies you were focused in the past year. I don't mean a large biography. Just tell me 1, 2, or 3. It doesn't matter which order it is. I just want to know your top 3 2017.
Fascinating.
That's easy for me. I'd say TypeScript. No, scratch that TypeScript. That was 2016 probably. I'd say NPM.
Ian's like, oh, this is easy for me. TypeScript, no, scratch that. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
It was related. I was in the bundle of the Angular NPM TypeScript group, but I think I have to pick one out. It's going to be NPM because that thing changed a lot in 2017 and it became really useful. And I would say Swift was really interesting to learn, and Redux. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Redux. There's a few implementations of this pattern. It came from like the reactive programming community from Facebook. And it's a really cool architectural pattern for building web apps. It's like MVC only does so much, right? It can tell you more or less how to structure your code, but doesn't tell you how to manage state very well. Unless you like the idea of copying models between controllers and trying to keep everything in sync, it becomes a nightmare. So Redux comes along and says, okay, we centralize state, we make it immutable, and it's unidirectional. It goes from the store out to the subscribers, more of a pub sub model for pushing state changes. And it really turns a lot of things on their head in terms of UI development workflow. So cool. I really enjoyed that.
Right on. Kito, what was your top 3, or Steve?
I'll say mine would probably be Polymer and web components would be number 1, because a lot of awesome stuff happened this year, and this is the first year that they're like web components natively are shipping in Chrome and Safari. and a lot of stuff has happened in that area. So that's number one. This was the first year I really got into doing some Angular 2, 4, 5, whatever stuff. So that's been kind of cool, Angular and Prime NG. And then also Java E7. Finally out. It's been really nice to work with it and sort of see how things are going. So
Cool. Very cool.
those are the three.
All right, Steve.
Okay, so I transitioned roles in August, so this is actually not a lot. So basically, until August, my life was Kubernetes all, OpenShift all the time, like digging in deep on that stuff and containers and all that. And now that I'm in the middleware role, I haven't done a lot yet with a lot of our technology. I'm still getting the lay of the land. It's been a while since I did Enterprise Java. So Wildfly Swarm has been kind of interesting to me. And just because I didn't know, well, we can talk about this later because
let's do that. Yep.
Let's do that. And then the other one that I'm interested in is I'm actually really excited about. Well, I love Keycloak, and I love Vertex. Do you not know Keycloak?
No, but name it,
we'll
and then let's come back to it. Yeah.
But the one that I'm actually most excited about learning right now, because I've learned the other two before, is AMQ. I haven't done enough with message buses, and I think they're underrated. I think they got a bad name. So I'm really excited about what I can do with message buses and microservices.
Let's talk about that too. So AMQ, Keycloak, and OpenShift, and we have a few others. And
there's
we'll
a bunch of
we'll ask you about Wildfly as well. All right, very cool. Well, mine's pretty simple. I'll just that way we could get started with the podcast. Scala, Akka have been my realm, and Elm has definitely been a big portion of this of my 2017.
Woohoo!
All right.
The funny part is when you said that, I thought you were saying 2018, and my brain went right there. So it was like I started thinking like, "Ooh, what am I excited about for next year?"
No. Sorry, you have to. You that's the next podcast. So.
Yeah, see after that next time.
Yeah,
sorry.
There we go.
I'll write in for that. I'll put it in the show notes.
All right. You know what,
Sounds
Steve? If you want to, really quick, tell us your 2018, and the rest of us will do that on the next podcast.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Really? Oh,
yes,
wow.
you're special, Steve.
You guys are so nice. All right. So again, I'm super excited about AMQ. I'm also excited about Infinispan. I haven't played with it, and I think it's under. I don't think most people know about it, like JDG Infinispan. And then the other one that I'm really Keycloak and Vertex, I knew them before, and I know them. I'm excited about them again. So I put them together, even though they're completely different. So I snuck in 4. That's like when people ask me for top 10, and I'm like, I can only do top 20. So,
cool.
There, I'm done.
All right, excellent, cool. All right,
awesome. All right, so we got a few headlines which we'll just run through quickly, just so we don't waste a lot of our precious time with Steve here. So one is for the UI stuff. Polymer TS 0.2.3 is out, and I mentioned this because I released it. so Polymer TS is it's a set of TypeScript decorators, which are sort of like Java annotations for writing Polymer web components in TypeScript. And I've been using it for a long time. And it was one of those projects that I've used in several different applications, but the maintainer obviously didn't have much time to work on it. So I emailed him one day and said, "Hey, are you working on this?" He's like, "No, why don't you work on it?" So he made me a contributor or collaborator or whatever. So basically I just put out a new release, and it's TypeScript decorators for Polymer 1.0. There's an official project from Google for Polymer 2.0, but this is for 1.0. So
all right, very good.
That's out. Ian, you have one here?
Yeah, Angular 5, we're on UI tier still here. So Angular 5 was released December 1st, and this release introduces a number of improvements, a new build optimizer, the universal state transfer API has improved with DOM support, which is good. I mean, if anyone has tried doing any server-side rendering with Angular, there's a Java implementation of basically the J2V8, I think it's called, that node implementation that runs on Java. that lets you kind of do server-side rendering with Java for Node and Angular. But I tried it out. As soon as you throw any kind of real-world UI stuff in there with like, it starts to break. So anyway, that's good to see some improvements there. HTTP client library is API rather is the new way to do REST API in Angular is now superseding the old HTTP library. And there's some other changes to CLI improvement, new router lifecycle, and more. You can read about that in our show notes if you want the link to Angular 5. And that's good to see for anyone who's doing Angular with Java.
Cool.
All
Steve,
right.
man. So we got Steve.
Java EE. Let's switch topics here.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. So I got a question. So you're Steve. You're a middleware advocate.
Yes.
Is that? Let me be controversial. Is
Yes.
that a sinking ship? Since everyone's all microservices.
Push your filthy mouth.
Let's go hardcore. Yeah.
Oh my God, Daniel! I thought this was supposed to be
Shameful.
a friendly
Shameful.
show. I thought this was supposed to be
Shameful.
friendly. Absolutely not. I think that's one of the
Only idiots say that sort of thing. That's right.
Exactly. Only a Neanderthal. Only a hipster. That's actually what I should say.
Yeah,
Go back to your elm. The thing is, I don't think so. Actually, if you look at most of the surveys, I think most people there's still a lot of people on Java EE. I think one of the problems is Java EE carries a lot of old baggage. And I think we as a Java EE community should actually come to terms with that and admit it, rather than trying to keep fighting it. Just say, look, yeah, Java EE really kind of sucked for a long time when it was like those big EJBs and remoting and all that, like the capital W web services. It sucked for developers. I'm sure it was great for enterprise architects and vendors. Like they loved it because you couldn't use it without some expensive IDE and a bunch of consulting hours. But for most developers, it was really a pain and not much fun to work with. But so I left that world a while ago, and I didn't go to Spring either because at the time Spring looked really just as much of a mess to me and not fun either. Like I was using Struts, and Struts was really kind of actually simple, and I got my head around it, and that was like, oh, this is nice.
Yeah.
And then someone was like, you got to use Spring, and I was like, no, I don't. That looks like a mess. And then they were like, well, then let's use EE, and I was like, ooh, that's even harder. But I think, like, coming back to Red Hat, I started using Java EE again, and as soon as I used, like, JaxRS, I was like, oh my gosh, this is freaking awesome. I feel like a Node developer now, right? Like, I just do a couple annotations, and I've got a REST endpoint. Yeah. And I think the problem for EE is that we just keep trying to talk about all the things that made it great in the past rather than focusing on, hey, it's a brand new thing, kind of. It's basically been rewritten. And I think we can talk about this later if you want to, or we can talk about it now. But the answer to your question is no, I don't think it's a sinking ship unless you don't pay attention to it, right? For some people, it will be a sinking ship. For some groups, they're going to be like, I'm kind of done with it. But I think for people who pay attention, it actually could be quite awesome for them.
Okay.
Again, my overall philosophy, though, is the right tool for the job.
Yeah.
So EE, I think, is good for certain scenarios. I don't think if you're writing a fast web service that's supposed to be returning images really quickly, and JavaScript, or you have JavaScript people on your team, write that in Node, right? Or Vertex or something else. But if you're writing transactional stuff, or you want the full power of all the interactions with the database and all that stuff, then EE makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think.
Yep. So would you say that, and maybe this is too neat of a statement, but would you say that corporations are it's the best fit for that is microservices, but for the moderate to small business, EE, a Java EE middleware could do a world of good. Like that's the perfect fit for it.
Actually, I think EE can even fit into a microservices world. Like I write a lot of my REST endpoints in Wildfly, not Wildfly Swarm, but just straight up Wildfly. Like I think this whole, like Adam Bien does a really great job of talking about all the, clarification question. What's the policy on this podcast about using moderate to full-on swear words? Are we a family-friendly operation?
I don't think we've ever tried to be.
Okay, so I think
We've never
there's a lot,
cussed though, really. So however you want to interpret that.
but that's how you roll. That's just how you roll. Okay, I think it's bullshit. Really, a lot of and I've given a talk for a while on this one, probably starting about 2.5, 3 years ago, was that a lot of people try to impose a technology onto microservices. Like, unless you're using, no offense, Daniel, Akka or Node.js or something like that, you're doing it wrong, right? Like, that's not what microservices is. Microservices is not a technology; it's an architectural pattern.
Right.
And so, if you want to use it and you feel comfortable with EAP, I think that's perfectly fine. And what I was originally going to say is Adam Bien has done a really good job of clearing up the FUD around EE server, like even like Wildfly or EAP being heavy, right? Like, if you look at his talks,
right,
there's not much benefit. And we can talk about going to a fat jar. Sorry, it's early in the morning for me. To going to like a fat jar and like somehow that Spring Boot's going to save you a bunch of memory, or I'll admit going to like something like Python or Node will probably use less memory just because they're loading up less things.
Yeah.
But there's trade-offs. So
sure.
So to answer your question, in certain ways, I almost think for a small company, I think EE might be overkill, unless they already have Java developers in-house.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They may not need all that. I think it's actually medium and large size companies where it makes more sense. But
yeah, interesting.
I just want to say, Steve, I totally agree with you. That's sort of where I've been this whole time. And I think this is something that happens the longer you're in the industry, the more you realize, number one, that we do the same thing over and over again and then give it a different name, with a slightly different twist. And that, patterns are not the same as the technology. So yeah, I've thought this for a long time that, microservices is about, providing a small, simple or smaller API via REST usually, and that can be done however you want,
Right. I mean, that's supposed to be the beauty of it. It's like, it's technology agnostic.
Right.
So what I love about it is clear separation of concerns, right? Like, leave my team alone. My team has decided we're writing this Daniel, can you write Elm on the back end? Because I want to make Daniel happy. Everything's about making Daniel happy. Can you use Elm as a back?
Well, it's a front end language, so no.
Sorry. Man. Well, so then I'll write it in Node, because almost all of you guys are doing all that. So my team wants to do Node. That's fine. Do it however you want. I don't want to get into that. I hate all those arguments between teams. So much time is wasted. Like, no, everybody has to use X, Y, or Z, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a waste. The one thing I will say, Kito, about the microservices thing is I think one of the differences between, and I like this analogy, some people don't, but like, microservices is to SOA as REST is to capital W web services, right? So there was those capital W web services which were complicated and vendor driven, and a bunch of developers were like, nah, that's really a pain. Let's just do REST, which we can do pretty easily, and it's fun for us. And I think SOA was basically the same idea, but instead of being top-down driven by vendors, microservices is like ground-up driven by developers, and it's not specification driven and tooling driven.
Yeah, that's a very good distinction, definitely.
But it copies a lot of the same ideas. Don't get Mark Little on that topic. You'll get an earful.
I can only imagine.
So
what did you want to say about AMQ, Steve?
So AMQ. So here's the thing. This is back to microservices again, because I think, and I saw a great talk. Now, it's not Pixar. It's DreamWorks, right? They're the ones who did Madagascar.
That's right. Yes.
And Shrek. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So DreamWorks, a great talk at Java 1 this year by a DreamWorks guy. And I felt this way for a while, but I didn't have the example to back it up.
Mm-hmm.
And the talk was about orchestration versus choreography in microservices. Right. And so what he talks about is, what most people are doing is orchestration. And that's how they started, where, an orchestra that has a conductor that leads everything. So in the microservices pattern, you'll have a class that orchestrates calls to other classes as it moves through the process, right? It's kind of like the conductor. And he was saying that ended up being kind of brittle for them, because if something happens in that conductor class, or something happens along the chain, it's hard to figure out what to do next, right? Because it's all orchestrated through that one class. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So what they moved to was using orchestration, choreography, sorry, where there is no central conductor, but everybody's moving in the same pattern. And so what they're using is the message bus as the central point. So instead of everybody being controlled by that one class, when somebody does a job, they just send off a message onto the message bus, and whoever needs to follow up on that just subscribes to that queue. And so everybody can be moving whenever they need to move, be doing the work they need to do without waiting for someone to tell them what to do. Right? It's just you sit there and you use message busing to talk about what you're going to do. And to me, I actually like that pattern a bit more. That seems, I know it introduces a different single point of failure, which becomes the message bus, right? But I also like the idea of pub sub. Like, I like this idea of, I'm just waiting for messages. You don't talk to me directly. There's this, so we can get swapped out no matter what. It's just all messages going back and forth. To me, it's like object-oriented programming at the API level, right? Like a pure encapsulation, just passing messages back and forth and doing our work. So that's why I'm excited about AMQ. And AMQ, I am excited about the idea of pushing choreography more than orchestration.
Yeah. So. Cool.
So can you, for those who don't know, can you explain what AMQ is?
So AMQ is an upstream project. It's in the Apache Foundation. It was just recently rewritten underneath using Artemis, which is the non-blocking message queue. It's basically a message broker that you can install anywhere you want, and it's open sourced. I'll put my propaganda hat on. It's released as Red Hat AMQ, ActiveMQ. Sorry, is it ActiveMQ? Yeah, it's Active. No, it's AMQ. ActiveMQ. Sorry, remember I'm new to the role, and it's early in the morning.
You're selling someone else's product.
I was going to say, isn't that
ActiveMQ is the upstream? ActiveMQ is the upstream, isn't it? Oh, now I got to go look.
Oh, what? Oh my God.
What? Who is this? No, yeah, ActiveMQ is the upstream. Golly, no, ActiveMQ is the upstream, and AMQ is our product. A-MQ is our product.
Okay.
Sorry if I
can see how that would be confusing.
Yeah. Sorry, I was getting in trouble. So
okay.
Yeah, I'm looking
at
it.
So ActiveMQ is the upstream in the Apache Foundation.
All right.
So here's my question. So how does all this, like, there's like 4,000 different messaging. Oh, I see. It has MQTT support. Nice.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And so what about, like, putting on the Java EE hat? What about JMS? Yes. How does that fit in all this?
So I think, if I understand this correctly, so remember, I've been out of the EE world for a while. So if you start asking me, like, I'm not like an Arun Gupta or Reza, right, where they've been like reading the specs and deeply involved in the specs that way.
Right.
So again, take this part with a grain of salt. But my understanding is that ActiveMQ would be JMS is the spec. ActiveMQ would be the implementation that you would use underneath. Like, it's the actual server that's doing it. JMS is what all servers like. Okay. Servers, you talk to the JMS spec. It's kind of like Hibernate doing JPA, right?
Right. Okay.
I think JMS. So anybody knows better, please correct me. Ian, it looks like you're about to say, "No, you're an idiot. Why did we invite this guy on?"
No. I'm just reading about this product. The IoT bit on the website caught my attention, actually. If you guys have any experience with that, or?
Yeah, a little bit, and that's why MQTT sounds appealing, because that's really popular for IoT.
Yes, I think that's why I'm excited about it. Right. So the 2018 technologies that I gave you are all the things I'm going to be listing or working on that I'm really excited to play with. So.
All right, great.
So Dano, one of those cool Apache projects that you've been looking at is also a message broker, essentially, isn't it?
No, Kafka is Confluent. It has nothing to do with Red Hat, but it's
no. But it's Apache.
It's Apache Kafka.
Okay,
it's Kafka.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
What I thought.
Yep.
So how is Kafka different than something like ActiveMQ?
So I think MQ is it has a pub sub and has a point-to-point, if I'm not mistaken. Kafka is a pub sub kind of centralized onto multiple brokers that you send messages to based on topic. But they don't have certain guarantees by design, and the messages are in there for a somewhat smaller period of time. And so the idea behind that is that you can, one thing you could do with Kafka is rewind. So you can say, okay, well, since my system went down, the listener went down for 3 hours, I'd like to rewind my offset back 3 hours from when I last crashed and reread the information again. So there are some characteristics with Kafka that aren't in other message queues. As my opinion goes, it's not meant to replace one with the other, but different people have different opinions on that. This is just. Go ahead. Yeah, no.
I've seen people use it complementarily, right?
Yeah.
Like you'll have a message bus and you'll actually put that with Kafka. I mean, as their front page says, they're more about streaming, right? So they're trying to build real-time streaming things as opposed to necessarily message passing. Right. So for the most part, I don't think a lot of people use message brokers to process streams in real time, right? You would just pass the message on. I think Kafka actually does stuff with the stream as it comes in. You can actually do
stream. So I was thinking, so Kafka's more like for
event sourcing.
Okay.
Yeah.
It can, you can use one for the other, but it's just again, right tool for the job. If you can have the expertise in your company to do both, I think bringing the two of them together. Like I know with AMQ, and with ActiveMQ, we'll be doing integration with Kafka. It's not like we think that there is a lot with Kafka, and we'll be adding to that as well. I just is not as in touch with that team, but we do it, especially in big data. It's used much more in big data scenarios.
Yeah, definitely. Yep,
that makes sense.
Definitely.
I got a question too for Steve. So one of these projects I worked on a few years ago, we were trying to set up like a distributed transactional system, and we ended up using JMS, where if one application sends a message to another one, the same application but in another region, we wanted the messaging to be transactional. If the message failed, it would roll back. It would try again. And you mentioned old school EJBs. One of the developers ended up using EJBs to do remote calls because I think we needed more control of the message passing and the transaction handling. Does this product have a solution for distributed transactions, or is it?
Now you're going too deep for me. I don't know the answer. But I do also think you bring up a good point about old school EJBs and stuff like that, is that there was a use case for them, right? I just think that was like the 5% use case. Like doing distributed transactions across data centers is, for most developers, something they'll almost never take on. It's kind of like writing low-level stuff in the kernel. Most developers never do it, but you want to make sure it's there. I think the problem for old school EE was that it tried to make everybody use that as part of the introduction to EE.
Right.
But so I don't know. But if you guys talk about another topic, I'll read really quickly and then I'll find
okay. Well, it does say somewhere on the ActiveMQ page, it does say something about support for transient, persistent, transactional, and XA messaging.
Yeah, yes. Reliable messaging. That's the kind of branding for this concept of distributed transaction. Reliable messaging. So if you see that, usually it means it supports some kind of distributed transaction. And they clearly say
like it. Yeah, exactly. So
all right, well, that's cool. No, I mean, you also mentioned Wildfly. I think, Steve, you've been working with Wildfly. I wanted to touch on Wildfly 11. Just got released.
Yep.
And I had a really positive experience with Wildfly 11. Actually, I'll tell you guys a quick story. So I've been working with Docker and a Java EE app that I've been trying to get deployed on in the cloud with it's a Docker-based cluster. We'll talk about that later, Docker and Kubernetes and clustering and cloud. Have some questions for Steve. So I was trying to run the application, finally enabled the mod cluster, which is the Apache component for the Wildfly JBoss clustering set up, and everything looked okay. But as soon as I fired up 2 nodes, things started to fail. So there was some issue with the virtual file system. I thought, well, how do I fix this problem? I was Googling the stack trace, all this stuff. And somebody mentioned Wildfly 11. It happened to have been released like 2 days earlier. So this was the best part, is all I had to do was change like one line in my Docker file, redeploy the app. I had to make a couple config changes too, actually, to be fair. But the transition from Wildfly 10 to 11 for me was seamless. It was so easy to do, and it fixed the problem at the same time, which was great. So yeah, that's just, I'd be interested to know, Steve, what your involvement is and perception is of Wildfly now that 11's available, and also supports Keycloak. You mentioned that there's some new security infrastructure in Wildfly 11. Tell us about that.
And what Keycloak is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's start with Wildfly 11 just came out, and Red Hat is all in on containers and container technology. So expect almost all of our middleware stuff to evolve rapidly to adapt to this container stuff. So like what you saw, like automatic clustering, like these are just things that will be coming and keep coming because of where we're going with containers. Okay, and then we can talk about that stuff again also later if you want. Keycloak is it's a central OAuth provider, a server, right? You basically spin up Keycloak, and now you've got an OAuth or centralized authentication storm path.
Yeah,
where it's like authentication.
I just learned it last week, actually.
Yeah, from Matt. Did you go to Matt's session?
Yep. Yeah, we should actually bring him in as a guest too. But yeah,
he's a great guest. But so Okta is as a service, right? Where you sign up for a service and then you have users and stuff.
Right.
Keycloak allows.
Let me just pause right here. OKTA is how it's spelled, is what you're referring to.
Yep. And another provider in that space is StormPath. I think there's Auth0 is another one too. AUTH0.
There's actually another one called Passport, I think, which is in that same sort of area.
Yeah, I don't know them all. I just try to, at least when I give a talk, tell about other people that are doing, or projects that are doing the same thing, so people can choose. So I want to have a healthy sample. But so Keycloak is an open source project, and is it Eclipse? I don't remember if it's Eclipse. It's open source for sure. It's probably Apache licensed, given that most of our stuff is Apache licensed now. And it's that ability to have that and install that in your own infrastructure if you want. So you could take and make your own Okta internally, right? And it does all sorts of great things. I gave a talk on it with the lead, one of the lead devs at Java 1 2 years ago. Packed room, people love it. The nice part about it is, one, you can have it yourself. Two, for developers, I don't know, but at least for me, when I want to go add like Google authentication and GitHub authentication and Twitter authentication to a page that I wanted, and I wanted multiple on the same page, I started looking at it and I was like, this is a nightmare. I don't want to touch this. So what I can do with Keycloak is I can set that up, then actually put the app keys into Keycloak, the Twitter app key and my Google app key, and then just say, turn it on, turn it on, turn it on, and automatically on the authentication page, all those start showing up. So at the very first level, that was something I loved. Two, now I'm not managing users anymore. Three, the other great part about it is it can be a central authentication server to all your services. So in that talk, like what I did was I had people logging in through a web page, but then as they went through the service, like it was passing the tokens all the way down to like a third level service that was authenticating against Keycloak to make sure the user had permissions to actually either read or write to the database in the application, right? So that's the integration with Wildfly that Ian was talking about, is that you can use Keycloak as a provider for authentication inside of your EE server, right, or your Java server.
Yeah,
and they've got. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I'm just researching a little bit here. It looks like it also supports JWT, which is awesome. I don't know if you guys have worked with.
That's kind of what I figured. Yeah,
this is, I think, a game changer for Java EE developers. Like, think about session state, right? And then replicating it. How much time have you spent dealing with that? Vendor-specific configuration files, runtime problems, all kinds of issues around session state replication and load balancing and sticky session, all this stuff. You introduce JWT, and now your server side is purely and truly stateless, right? You have no state. Like, you create this token, you send it to the client, it expires eventually, but every request includes this token. You don't have to maintain any kind of session state. So it's very cool to see Keycloak supporting that, and now it's also available through the Wildfly 11, right?
Yep. So it's integrated in. So basically, you just you say, here's my provider, and it'll know to go to right Keycloak and start doing this stuff. Actually, we use it a lot internally at Red Hat now as well for a lot of our properties, right? Because it's just a nice. Oh, and it does Active Directory integration. You can actually do two-way if your systems administrator likes that. So if you need to integrate with Active Directory, it does that, or it can talk to a Kerberos source. It can talk to a, what's the one I'm thinking of? Active Directory, LDAP. You can point it at an LDAP provider as well, right? So you can have sophisticated stuff on the back end, but you can also just have it very, very simple. Because like when I write web apps, I never want to handle user credentials.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be the person that's like, 5,000 different users, usernames and passwords are exposed to the wide world because I didn't do something correctly. Like, that's great. Don't give me authentications, usernames, and passwords. Let somebody else handle that. I'll just trust Google that they know how to authenticate people, and just let me know.
Right.
So I really like it, especially since it's open source. I'm a big fan of everything open source, and I like being able to control it myself, like as opposed to being in somebody else's service. And I like it being open source because I'm cheap.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool. You mentioned Infinispan earlier, Steve, too. I tried to get a clustered cache set up with Infinispan. It looks so easy to use. Unfortunately, with the licensing issue I ran into, I said I can't use this.
What's the licensing issue?
Well, if you want to enable it, like it's like one of these modules in your JBoss config.
You mean like if you want to use it in Wildfly as a caching agent in Wildfly or JBoss?
Yeah, you got to pony up the bucks. You got to pay Red Hat big bucks to enable the licensing for it. There's no technical issue, just the licensing issue for me.
Yeah,
but
hey, I mean, this is the new open source. No, I'm just kidding.
Nice. I thought it was a friendly show again.
I'm just kidding.
No, I mean, I hear you, Ian. And that's one of the things that I think, seriously, as a developer advocate, I struggle with. Because like I said, I'm cheap also, but also as a developer, I just want things to be easy. And I don't want to talk to a salesperson. And I want to be able to download technology and just start using it. But as a Red Hat employee, I really like having a paycheck. So
no, it makes sense. Red Hat's doing extremely well. I mean, there's no question their model is working. It's just think like once you start having to deal with per CPU licensing and like your whole scalable, like that inhibits scalability in a way, because the more successful your application is, the more you're gonna have to pay. And fair enough, like it's a business model, but it's like you said.
The thought with that, just so you know, the thought with that is the more successful you are, the more money you should have to pay, right? Like that would be. Yeah. That's the idea with it. Like, yeah, you're scaling more. Like, we're not asking you to pay before you start making. It's not like pay a whole bunch of money whether you're successful or not.
Right. Yeah,
I mean, pay regardless.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the model for successful web applications today, it's largely free sign up, ad-based revenue. A venture capital. How else do you make money building a web app today? I mean, you're not going to charge your users, exorbitant prices to use your app unless it's some very specific niche thing. But generally,
yeah, but I think though, Ian, you're kind of, this is actually what I see a lot of people do, is they forget that like lots of applications are written which are not public consumer facing projects. Like I hardly ever work on those. I work on internal applications, and the whole value is completely different there. It depends on the value that you're providing for whatever group, whatever organization is using it. Does it make their life easier? Do they save money?
Right.
Does it reduce
I think
costs?
in the model that I think Red Hat assumes for what you're talking about, and this is me being low enough on the pay scale that I can say this like somewhat unofficially because I don't really know high enough up into the company what it is, but it's that, well, so you should use the open source stuff and do the extra work to make it work since you're VC funded and you don't have the same support ideas, and it's on you to do the technical integration part. We give you all the bits. There's nothing that we disable. Like, so you should use Wildfly and you should use Infinispan and dig into the doc and make it happen. And then when you're making enough money that you actually want it to be easier, you're making support, then you can pay for it, right? And or not. Like, just keep doing it. Like, you could be like Facebook, who uses plenty of our, like, not Red Hat technology, but plenty of open source technology, which may be Apache, which may be Red Hat, which may be whatever, and they never pay for it. And we don't expect them to ever pay for it. Like, that's not our business model, to make everybody pay for everything we ever make. Our business model is, you want support and you want a little bit easier than the open source bits and a little bit actually boring. You want things to be a bit boring using open source, so you pay us to make things boring for you. That's kind of how it works. Sorry, Ian. I wish I could help you more. I know it gets me as a developer advocate, though, because I want developers to do nothing but love me and love us. But in general, developers want everything for free, and then I don't.
It's fair. I mean, you like Kito mentioned, a lot of applications are internal applications. You develop for a large client, maybe with the budget to pay for Red Hat licensing, so on. Then there's the open source model, and what if there was something in the middle, like the startup model, where it's closed source but there's no budget? That would be great.
We're never closed source. Period. Just to say, nothing as far as closed source. But so here's the thing. So thank you for a nice softball, Ian. The softball would be you should start looking more at container technology, right? And Kubernetes, right? Because our licensing pricing model with Kubernetes is per CPU. So so once you get one license of EAP within Spinispan on that CPU, all the containers that you actually run on that CPU are included in that one cost. So you can actually start scaling up, right? That gets you more density and more scale until you actually start using more machines.
And I think the other thing is that what I think is the most common for the whole startup sort of phase is essentially just cloud services in general, right? So, you have a small team, small budget, but you can pay a monthly fee.
Yeah.
so
that would be like our OpenShift Online Pro,
mm-hmm.
right? You could do something like that, and you could pay for. So that's your in-between tier, also, Ian. Pay for Online Pro, get JBoss EAP with Infinispan turned on, which I think is turned on by default as soon as you get it, and that's a certain amount per month, and then that will scale as you start to use more of them, but you use more resources, but not more servers necessarily. If that makes sense.
That's true.
There's a lot of models, but I think, and it's the one that gets me because I've been a developer for long enough, is like, I want everything to be open source and great. Like, I want it to be open source in exactly the way I want to run it. And then you end up being companies that, it's a tension, and I don't know how to work out that tension. I get the tension completely.
Could I interject? There have been a lot of words, and I think some of our audience doesn't know the Red Hat realm. A few terms have gone by. OpenShift. What is the difference between Wildfly and Wildfly? What would you call it? Storm?
Yes. Oh no, Wildfly Swarm and Wildfly or EAP. So okay. So let's start with Wildfly. So Wildfly is the upstream for JBoss EAP. Right. So our product is JBoss EAP. Our project is Wildfly.
In other words, the backing open source project.
Yes.
That
all our
is Wildfly.
Is Wildfly. So all our engineers do commits against Wildfly.
Correct.
And then that goes through the testing process, and then like once every time we feel like there's a new release, we'll branch, stabilize that bit, and then release a product off of it. Right.
Right.
But then they'll go back to working in the head again. And just
to be clear, EAP is called, what does that stand for? Enterprise
Application Platform, I think.
Okay,
yeah. No, I don't think anybody ever says it out. Like, it's just like
right. But essentially,
and actually, most people just say JBoss, right?
Right. It's like it's the application server, right?
Exactly. It's the same thing as WebSphere or any weblog. Right. And then Wildfly Swarm, which I think is absolutely terribly named, and I'm working hard to get the name changed, is our Red Hat's implementation of the micro profile. Okay. So for the listeners who don't listen to every single one of your episodes, those foolish people who didn't hear Reza and other people talk about microprofile, I'm going to give my highly opinionated view of microprofile as someone who
That's what podcasts are for.
Yeah. And I came to it relatively later because I was on the OpenShift side when the whole announcement was made. And I was just like, what is this microprofile? Go ahead.
So OpenShift is your cloud platform.
Oh, OpenShift is Red Hat's distribution of Kubernetes.
Oh.
So in the same way, so I'll give a quick pitch on this one. Sorry. So Red Hat does. I'll do this like I'm going to talk now. I'm switching into talk mode. Does Red Hat own the Linux kernel?
No.
Right. But we're like the number 2 or 3 contributor to the Linux kernel. Red Hat doesn't own Kubernetes. Right. We're like the number 2 or 3 contributor, though. We're actually the number 2 contributor to Kubernetes. We sell Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We don't just say, hey, here's the Linux kernel, go have a good time.
Right.
So instead, what we do is distribution around it and productive for you to use it, right? How bad are the dogs in the background?
No, but you were cutting out, so could you restate?
Yeah, let me go boot the dogs. Hold on, I gotta boot the dogs. They're starting to work out. Hold on.
All right.
Okay. All right, editor pause, because we could use
editor pause for dogfight.
Yes.
We could do the news too while we're waiting, but
yeah, but we are short on time, which is why I want to pause.
Sure.
Because
we're still live on YouTube. Hi, YouTube.
Oh, hi, YouTube. All right, editor, continue.
That's right.
So when we Red Hat, we don't just give you the Linux kernel and say, hey, here's the Linux kernel, go have a good time. We actually put a whole bunch. We make a distribution around it. And so we're doing that same thing with Kubernetes as well, and we call it OpenShift, right? So OpenShift is our way of making a whole distribution around Kubernetes.
Okay, and for those who don't know what Kubernetes is, can you explain that?
Yeah, let's go. Let's keep going down. Turtles all the way down. Turtles all the way down. So Kubernetes is your container management platform. So I'm sure almost all of your listeners at some point have now played with Docker, right, and played with containers. And if they're a developer and not a systems administrator, or they don't do much systems administration stuff, they probably played with Docker and they're like, wow, that's kind of not that exciting. It's like a lightweight VM that I still have to maintain and figure out how to plug into the internet and scale it and do all the other stuff I would have to do with a VM. Like, it's lightweight, it's nice, and it's immutable. That's kind of nice, but it's not much. And so what most people are looking for is actually a container management platform, which helps to move containers around on a cluster, actually hook them up to the internet, automatically scale them up or down, or at least you to scale them up and down. If they crash, all the stuff that most developers actually want their platform to do beyond just a single container. So Kubernetes is the open source project it started from Google, but it's probably, I would say it's the industry de facto standard now for container management platforms.
That's a really good, succinct explanation. Okay,
that was a really great explanation.
You definitely do have your talking voice.
Yeah. Well, so it's just like Daniel said before, it comes from years of practice, right? Like,
yes. So then, all right. So what was the other point?
Oh, so Wildfly Swarm.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
And OpenShift.
Well, we did OpenShift, so that's just, I had lived in the OpenShift world most of the last 5 years, and so I hadn't been really deep because I was learning Python, I was learning Node, I was learning containers, I was learning all that stuff, and now I'm coming back to Java EE. But the micro profile announcement came out about that time, and I was like, what is this? This is just too late, too little. What are you doing? This is great. Who cares about a specification? Then I moved to middleware, and I was like, oh. See what micro profile is exciting. About it was exciting was it finally got Oracle to move, right? Like EE was stagnating for the longest time, and they weren't moving, and so IBM and Red Hat and Pyara and a whole bunch of other Tommy EE basically got together and said, like, well, if you're not going to do it, then we're doing it, right? Independent of you, Oracle, we're moving the platform forward. And this microservices world is really big, and we need to do something around it. And so they basically said, let's take the greatness that is Java EE and take out some of the cruft that most people won't use in microservices, like the remote EJBs that we were talking about and all the stuff that accumulate over time. Basically take the good parts and put that into a specification. So it's like CDI, JAX-RS, and JSON-P, right? So basically everything you just need to write a REST endpoint, and it's super hot and easy to use. So that part was cool, right? Like, let's do this. And then Oracle's like, oh, wow, this is actually movement and people care. And I think that was actually the tip of the spear that got us to EE4J, right? Which is the open sourcing of the entire EE platform.
Well, I think there is that and the whole Java Guardians thing. I think it was the two sort of together.
Those two together basically were the, we got to move this along. And then from a technical standpoint, so that's the political standpoint. That's kind of interesting. But from a technical standpoint, like why you actually care as a developer about microprofile is for the reason that you can actually strip down your app server now to just what you want. So with Wildfly Swarm, you can make a fat jar if you want. So for those who are Spring Boot fans and love fat jars, for whatever reason they love fat jars, you can make a fat jar. But you can also make, with Wildfly Swarm, a hollow jar. And what that means is you take just the pieces of the app server you want. So I want JAX-RS, JSON-P, and maybe one of the monitoring profiles that's in there, but I don't want CDI for whatever reason. You can actually make a hollow jar, which is just those pieces of the app server from the microprofile spec, bake that into the top layer of a container, and then every time you're doing code changes, you're just dropping code changes into it. It's like a hollow jar you can think of as your customized app server, right? It's basically just the pieces you want of the app server and not the whole thing.
Cool.
So I think WebSphere Liberty, which is IBM's implementation of microprofile, is either fat jar or the whole app server, but I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on Liberty, so take that one with a huge grain of salt. Okay, but that's what Swarm provides, and which is why now I'm actually excited about microprofile and Wildfly Swarm, because I'm actually excited about the hollow jar. So back to containers. Do you want to keep going, or want to take a break?
Yeah.
No, keep going.
Okay.
Just interject. Sorry.
Okay, good. Yes, please interrupt me. I'm from New York. Yo, we always just talk over each other. Just jump right in.
No worries. No worries.
Jump right in.
Just before you jump into the container thing, just to help maybe add a question here that you can address as you go. So Wildfly JBoss traditionally has this feature like domain mode versus standalone mode. Domain mode is to basically simplify the configuration of all the hosts in your cluster, make it easy to copy the configuration from the controller to the slaves, as it were. Now that we have containerization, right? We basically, like you said, it's a stateless, immutable, lightweight VM that contains so if you're running a 10 node cluster of JBoss or Wildfly, do you even need domain mode anymore if you're running on a Docker or some containerization platform? Because each node is the same. That's how another way you can manage the configuration.
In general, we turn domain mode off when we enable it for Kubernetes, for OpenShift or Kubernetes. And we've kind of gotten rid of John too, right? Which is JBoss operations something or other.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of our customers really like it back before containers, but because, like Ian said, containers are immutable, you don't want to go into a running container and change its state through John, right? Like that makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
So we don't really, John's not really shipping anymore. It's mostly standalone mode now. I mean, I think this is one of the big things that's happened with container management platforms, and the move to that is a lot of stuff that we used to bake into the app server for management is now actually going into the platform rather than being part of the app server anymore.
Nice.
Right?
Nice.
And the app server, what's the app server now is just the stuff that's around the app. Right? And so like even with microprofile where they have some monitoring stuff built in, usually that's monitoring stuff to push to your outside platform, not for monitoring that you're expected to put with some thing with Wildfly Swarm or WebSphere Liberty that monitors it, but something that's going to kick out metrics to Kubernetes or something out there that can
Right.
grab it.
And just for our listeners, to help clarify one thing, a key concept about containerization, right, is the difference between, they use a metaphor, the sheep versus pets.
Don't say it. Don't say it. Don't say it. Don't say it. I hate that metaphor. Hold on. Don't say it. The analogy is cattle versus pets. Oh, makes me, as a biologist, it is the worst.
Right. Okay,
Man,
I'm not blaming you.
We can't talk about recycling. We can't talk about cows.
Well, here's okay. Now, Ian, you've got me on my soapbox. I'm gonna have to give this one because this is one of my. Oh, this is such a. I'm not gonna change the world. I know I'm not, but I'm gonna at least try to, because I've tried already and it's just stuck. No one wants to listen to me, but I'm gonna tell you why it's terrible. Okay, so for your listeners who don't know, can I do this, Ian? Are you okay if I keep going?
Go ahead, please. Go for it.
So the original analogy was cattle versus pets, which is such a Silicon Valley bro analogy that it just. So the idea is, with containers versus VMs, VMs are your pets. They're things that you care about and you name, and you'll spend thousands and thousands of dollars, at least in the Western world, if they get sick, to make sure that they're okay. You buy them fancy little food bowls. You care a lot about them, and you nurture and you feed them. And that's usually what you do with your VMs, where you're running like SAP or Oracle or something like that. Containers are like your cattle, like on a ranch, right? You don't care about them. They're interchangeable, and they're just a big mass of things. If one breaks its legs, you shoot it, and you just bring in another cow, right? Did I get that pretty right?
That really is a horrible analogy.
Yes. So the one I object to that analogy on cultural bounds. Like, there's about over 1 billion people in this world who find cows to be holy animals, and the idea that you just treat them as like replaceable and you can put a bullet in their head is just like totally offensive. So I don't even want to go there for that, right? Like, that is just so. But from a biological perspective, it's wrong as well. I used to be a conservation biologist. I worked in a consulting firm doing habitat conservation plans, and we would go out and talk to ranchers. And I can tell you, ranchers care a lot about each individual cow. They are not just some irreplaceable thing where, like, I'm going to put a bullet in its head. There's like thousands and thousands of dollars riding on each cow. Like, they spend a ton of money, and they care. They monitor them. They do all sorts of stuff to their cows. So the analogy I'd rather have is ants and elephants, where elephants are your VMs and ants are your containers. Elephants put a lot of investment into every member of the herd. They actually will mourn if one dies, right? Like, there's elephant graveyards. You can see them like rubbing their tusk over skulls of old elephants. They care a lot about their offspring. They care a lot about each individual member of the herd. So that's your VMs. Containers are ants. And some of you, I won't make anybody, bring this in forward, but may have smushed an ant at some point in your life, right? Whether through malice as a child or as an accident.
I have.
Oh, Daniel, I didn't want to make you. Oh, I'm so sorry. But you never see like a bunch of ants just gathering around and mourning that ant, and like they're like, oh, we'll pick that one up, bring it back to the colony, and use that for food as well, right? And if they actually want to increase the throughput on something, they just bring more sisters out to do it. And they are actually all identical. Like, literally all worker ants are identical clones of each other. They're all female, and they're exactly the same. So they exactly scale horizontally like we want to do with our containers. Okay, so I would love if we moved to ants and elephants. And I'm sorry I went off.
Awesome.
No. Thank you for clarifying that metaphor and moving on it. So my question was,
yes.
Now I could be smug when someone says something. I love doing that. If someone brings up that analogy, I'll just shake my head, just like,
oh, you are so wrong. I can't believe you are wrong, gauche, and culturally insensitive.
There we go. What is this, the 1800s? What the hell's wrong with you?
Oh my gosh. So yes, derailing the conversation. No, but that's an important distinction. Fair enough. More compassionate metaphors are always welcome. So,
or more accurate metaphors.
Yes, more accurate. All right. Does this awareness, is my question for Stephen, does this awareness of the difference between containers and VMs, how has that influenced Red Hat's product strategy? How has it influenced tools like Wildfly, like Kubernetes? Well, you guys are contributors, not owners of that. But how has it influenced the product strategy at Red Hat? Like, you mentioned domain mode is being turned off. John is being deprecated. What other changes are you noticing here in terms of supporting containers?
So I don't want to say John is deprecated, because we still have a lot of customers who have not made the move to containers yet. And in a non-container world, John makes a lot of sense. So just to be clear on that. But Red Hat is all in on containers. So we've moved a large portion of our teams into working on container technology. And it is changing the way we package and deliver software. Most of our stuff, we still produce RPMs, but we are also producing now containers at the same time. We actually have a container catalog of certified containers that customers can download and buy stuff from. It actually solves a really big problem that most Linux distributions have had for a long time. Actually, even usually some Windows operating systems have had for a long time, containers do, which is usually when we give software to you, we just give you the bits and you put the bits down, and then you actually have to go do a whole bunch of configuration, right? And what containers is they're runnable by default. So it's not just that we're giving you bits and the configuration, so that once you put it on your machine, you can just say run, and it runs. Right? So it's a much nicer way for us to package up and deliver stuff to our customers for containers. We've actually got a new version of RHEL, which is called Atomic OS, where there's basically like the kernel, journal D, system D, just core utilities and nothing else. And we're expecting that you're going to bring everything else as containers that you want to run. So you want Postfix? Bring it as a container. You want Apache? Bring it as a container. You want 5 different versions of Apache? Bring them all as containers, right? There's a lot of advantages for us to move it. So we're all in on containers, and we're moving things more and more to delivering them as containers to our customers. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. One follow-up question on that is, what does it mean for developers? Like, this is great for product managers, but what does it mean? How do developers take advantage of containerization?
Well, so the way that you should, at a first level, what you should be able to take advantage of is things just got easier for you. Like there's nothing to do to take advantage of containers. Like for example, I know most of it are, any of you on Linux machines? Any of you? Yeah?
Use some, yeah.
Yeah. So when you go in there and you like want to install the latest and greatest package, and you do RPM or you do yum or you do apt-get, right? And you say, oh, I want this latest package, and it says, no can do, because this other thing that you're not really using but that's on the machine requires this older version of this package, and so therefore you can't get to the latest and greatest. That goes away, right? Because everything is self-contained within the container. I can have 7 different versions of the glibc libraries, each in their own container, and there's no conflict. So I can actually deliver, like, so for a developer, I can give you I can give you Wildfly in a container, and you just start, instead of doing the install and configure, you just do run, right? The change that happens, though, for developers now is we're used to dropping source code into a running VM and expecting that when we restart the VM, that it's actually going to be there when we restart the VM, right? We can't do that anymore with a container because they're temporarily mutable. So you can change the state of a running container, but as soon as you restart it, it's gone, right? And so what has to happen if you want your change in there is you actually have to do a build of the container. We've done some work around that for developers. It's called Source to Image. It's an open source project. I think it's on GitHub. I know it's on GitHub, actually. It's called Source to Image. And the idea there is you can build a builder Docker image, so for our Java one, let's just take our Tomcat one, for example. It's already got Maven built into the builder image, and it's got Tomcat built into the builder image. If you do Docker run on that image, it just says, hey, I'm a builder. I don't run, right? I'm used to build source code. And so what happens is if you do source to image build and you use that image and a source code repo, as long as there's a pom.xml in the root of that source code repo, the builder image will start up, start a container, bring your source code in, run Maven on it, build your app, drop it into the right place inside the container for wherever you have Tomcat or Wildfly installed, and then spit that out a new container. And then on that resulting container, you can just do Docker run, and it'll just run with your source code there. So that was it sounds like a complicated thing. It's really easy in the sense that you just basically say, here's my source code, make me a container. And you don't have, like, someone who really knows how to put Tomcat into a container and how it's supposed to be configured and how to set up the JVM for a container can do all that work. And then I, as a developer, just get to say, build this for me. And I get a container with all that set.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's cool. Just a couple more very quick questions. So
Sure.
having worked with this workflow as well, like there's different solutions out there, like Atlassian introduced Bitbucket pipelines. Obviously, there's build servers like Bamboo, Jenkins, that kind of thing, which require you to go as a put on the build engineer hat and go and set up your build process to build your container with your latest code, like you're describing. Does Red Hat offer any other tools? And the other part of this question is the runtime situation, because even if you get your container built with your latest code and you go and deploy it in the cloud, there's a lot of gotchas when it comes to running Java on containers. Like one is, for example, memory management. You think my app needs 500 megs of RAM, so I set my XMX to 512, and then I boot up my app, and it stops running after 5 minutes. It slows to crawl, and then it stops running, and it reboots because that's what containers do. Then the same thing happens 15 minutes later, and you're stuck in this infinite cycle of
rebooting
agony. So what the heck? And then you figure out, well, the way containers manage memory is a little bit different, and you shouldn't just try. You can't just keep trying to increase the memory. You have to set reasonable limits, and it takes time to learn all this stuff. So does OpenShift solve these kind of problems for developers in terms of both the build, deployment, and runtime for Java?
So great question. Lots of different pieces to it. Let me start first with, how about I start with the OpenShift build part, and then we'll go to the JVM stuff. So for the build stuff, you can use source to image as an individual developer. The other thing that we enable is syncing into the running container, because you don't want to actually do a whole build every time, like you're moving that would drive Kito and you insane if every time you made a JavaScript change, you had to do an entire Maven build, right? You'd be like, what the, I'm not using this. So what we allow is you to rsync your changes from your local machine into the running container. So it's not permanent, right? It's not baked in, but for your daily development flow, you don't really care. You're just working on your machine and keep rsyncing either the war, or even if it's an exploded war, just the JavaScript or the JSP file. And you can keep working quickly in the running container, seeing it in the entire context, which may be, if it's a microservice, you've got all 5 microservices running, and you're actually working with the whole thing, not some mocked out stubs on your local machine. So we do that, but seriously, for most of our large customers, they use Jenkins, right? They're using Jenkins or some automated build system, because they have all sorts of quality control around their code. So the normal flow for the at large places is daily little development. They're doing it kind of back and forth with rsync. They're good with their change. They commit to Git or Bitbucket. That kicks off some CI/CD process. We have a registry, a Docker registry built into OpenShift. So at the end of the Jenkins process, if everything passes, the image gets pushed into that Docker registry, and then OpenShift deploys it if it's set to automatic deploy. So for a developer, they're just like, I push my code into GitHub, and suddenly it's running, whenever the process finishes, up in my cloud, right? So that's what OpenShift enables, which is something that's different than Kubernetes. Kubernetes, up to this point, as a community, has said we're not in the build business. We're in the deployment business. And this is, again, that distribution idea. Like, most of our customers actually build code, so we need to take that on for them. Does that help answer that question for you?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, and so back to the JVM. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kito.
Go ahead.
So back to the JVM. Yeah, so the JVM was built before containers was around, right? And the JDK is not too smart. JDK is not really C group aware. It's not as aware of stuff in the kernel that we use in containers to manage resources. But that said, we have Red Hat OpenJDK engineers pushing a lot of changes upstream into the OpenJDK around getting it smarter about running inside a container. This is back to Daniel's thing, I think, or was it yours, Ian, about being all in on containers, right? Like, we're all in, and our JDK team is working quite closely on, and our performance team too. So I just watched an internal webinar, which hopefully we will make external soon, the recommendations around it, because on our OpenShift free tier, the OpenShift online free tier, the containers only get, like you said, a gig of RAM, right? And so for most developers, they're like, how do I run anything in Java in a gig of RAM? And so it turns out you actually have to pay a lot of attention to your JDK tuning parameters when you're running in that headspace, because the JDK is not expecting things to be the way they actually are. So things like setting, if you're running in a gig of RAM, set the max to a 512 megs, and then set the minimum to some, it was a whole bunch of flags they were turning on. And so we'll bake that into our product, but we'll also publish the results of that so people can benefit everywhere else.
Nice.
Right? But that's the nice part about the container platform. For the developer, they shouldn't have to care, right? Either the ops person or the vendor will bake that directly into the container or the template, that the way that thing starts up. And for the developer, it's like, oh yeah, great. I get to just focus on my code. The person who was the expert did that stuff for me. Like,
Nice.
that's something. I'm a big Postgres user because I love PostGIS, which is spatial, the spatial blade for Postgres. I love spatial stuff. So that we work with Crunchy Data Solutions. I've always, you guys know that you should be running your databases with a master and read replicas, right? At least, right, when you're running. And so I see you shaking your head, yes, Daniel. So now I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how often do you actually do that when you're deving?
Oh, never.
Why?
I have other things to do.
Exactly, because you like take a look at the manual and you're like, I'm never going to be able to figure this out. And even if I do, I probably have done it wrong.
Yeah.
And it's just forget it.
Not my realm.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So the nice part is when I work with them, I love PostGIS. They make a distro of a PostGIS and containers for OpenShift or Kubernetes, even just straight Kubernetes. And I just basically read in their template, and I give one command, and I've got master read replica databases going with a service in front of the read replicas and a service going in front of the master, so I can have separate reads and writes. And it's just one line, and it's all running because the experts can do that, and then I can just use it. And that's one of the big benefits for developers moving to this container managed platform, is the people who know what they're doing can set that stuff up for you, and you can just be like, oh, great, I got it. Nice. I don't have to spend my time thinking about how to do that.
Right. Cool.
Very nice. Well, we're getting towards the actually we're kind of over our normal time span, so
I warned you. I warned you.
Oh, but it's all good stuff though. So hey.
Okay, good.
Can we end the podcast? It's already 2018.
Well, now we can actually talk about what we're excited for this year.
Hey, there you go.
There we go.
Someone added a link here about the support model for JDK 9.
Wait, on our comments?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Our show notes that we're editing.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I'll bring this up quickly, even though we're out of time. We as a Java community are in a kind of a tricky place right now with supported Java, because Java 9 support ends officially in September, I think, of 2018.
Oh,
wow.
Yes. And support for Java 8 ends officially September 2018.
Our next...
and Oracle has not made it. They're moving to the 6-month cycle of,
right.
We're going to go to 6 months within an LTS release. It's not clear when and where the next LTS release is coming out.
Oh, wow.
So I know we as Red Hat are in a tricky place, and we're working with IBM and Oracle, hopefully, to try to come up with something like maybe we'll take the OpenJDK and claim that we'll backport for something. But we're all right now in a kind of a tricky place about what to do about the JDK. So I just thought your listeners should be aware and start reading up on it and maybe push Oracle, because they're the ones who kind of still own the JDK at this point.
Yeah.
There's only so much we can do. We're trying, and we're all trying to work together. But it's a kind of a big issue about supported JDKs.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the article. We'll put this in the show notes. But so it looks like if you want to pay for support, you can still have support. But if you want any like free support, you're
right. Like the patches to the JDK, like the normal JDK, are gone. And the thing is, for us, we don't ship the Oracle JDK anymore. Red Hat does not ship it anymore because we are behind the OpenJDK.
Right.
So we're in an interesting spot. So if our customers want to pay for the Oracle JDK, they can. It's just an interesting spot to be in.
Right, because
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah,
All right.
is right.
Good to know. Good to know.
But the thing I did want to say that I didn't get into in the show notes, which we didn't get to, and I'll just say it really quickly, is now is a freaking awesome time to be a Java developer. I mean, I'm serious. Like, it might also be because I've joined the middleware thing, but I'm also like really excited, seriously, about like where we are. Like, EE is open source. There's the Open JDK. Like, we never had this before. We are by far the biggest programming languages used in enterprises. The word on the street is you write in Node or Ruby when you're in a startup, and then when you actually get to be big enough that you need scale, you rewrite the whole thing in Java, right? Like, that's what everybody jokes about. Like, Netflix is written in Java, AWS is written in Java. Like, it is an awesome time. There's all sorts. Kafka is there's just so much good, like all the big data stuff.
All Java.
Yeah, it's just like it's such a great time to be a Java developer. I'm so excited to be back. Like, there's so much I get to play with.
I'm just excited to say that I was right all along since 1995.
Exactly.
Yeah,
same here, Daniel.
Same here. Well, yeah, and just to take that a step further, it's also like pretty much, you know, if I want to write, I've been meaning forever to write some AWS Lambdas so I can play with my Alexas more. You know, I know I can do that in JavaScript, but I can also do it in Java. There's still a Java API for pretty much everything. Yeah. And it's really great for IoT stuff. Like, a lot of the IoT stuff I'm seeing is, you know, Java.
Yeah, and that's exactly where Java got its start, right? Java
exactly.
Built for like a TV top system.
And a coffee machine.
That's what they were going to do, right? So it is IoT.
Yep.
Cool. I love it.
All right, so let's move on to picks. This is a new segment which I'm trying to get off the ground because I'm the only one that brings picks. But fortunately, we have a couple more other than me this time. So,
all right,
my pick is getting things done methodology. All these will be in the show notes at enterprisejavanews.com. I am a big GTD geek. I've probably been doing it for over a decade, and essentially what it is, it's just a way to try and be productive, either personally or professionally. I do it for both, but it's just a way to like manage all the tasks, all the different projects you have to do, and try to do them efficiently. It has a lot to do with checklists, but and there's lots of apps to do it. My favorite is Nozbe, Nozbe. But anyways, check it out. There's a link in the show notes. So that's my pick.
Are we doing productivity picks then?
No, whatever you want.
All right.
Wait, I had a question for Kito though about the GTD. Do you know if there's a plugin for Evernote, which is my favorite?
I think if you look, if there's not plugin, there may be templates and stuff. I know people do use it for GTD.
Okay, cool.
So
thanks.
Actually, on that note, I'm working on a GTD product. Actually, interestingly enough, but it's still in incubation. But hopefully, Kito, I get to share that with you guys someday.
I would love to see it. Definitely.
Cool. Well, I think GTD is going overboard, and it runs your life, and it's a cult. Therefore, I do Pomodoro technique, and I've been doing that one.
They are not mutually exclusive.
They are not. You're right.
Pomodoro to some, but much more.
Right. So I've been doing that for 10 years, although with my teaching and my conferences, it's kind of pushed it by the wayside because I can't necessarily time those. But when I need to do a task, I'll always go to Pomodoro Technique. You can take a look at pomodorotechnique.com, and it is 25 minutes haul ass with whatever you want to do, but just make sure you do one thing and one thing really well, and then take a 5-minute break, and then do it again. 25-5, 25-5. At the end of 4, you take a longer break, like a 20-minute break or a 25-minute break. And what you want to do is you want to replicate a shower thought to where everyone's a genius in the shower. All your best ideas, aren't on the computer. You're pushed away from it. And a great programming is never done on the computer. And so that's the thing that that the Pomodoro technique, tries to address the pure focus aspect of doing something. And so Kito is right. Getting things done are recipes as to what to do with your life. Pomodoro technique is the how to do it. What is the glue that binds it all together?
That's great, Daniel. I never thought of my shower as billable time, but I got to start thinking.
No, absolutely right. You're and so one of the stories that I put inside of my Pomodoro technique talk is Peter Higgs of the Higgs boson, and his story behind it. He was not at a lab at all. He was out walking in a forest when he had this revelation on the Higgs boson field. So these things don't occur ever in the lab. It's when you're kind of not thinking about it, and that's when it. And people always say left brain, right brain, although that's not scientifically real. But you know what I'm talking about when I say that. And when you give your brain a rest, that's when you come up with some pretty good solutions.
For sure. I've got an item for the picks list here. I think, if you don't mind, I'll just mention that IntelliJ IDEA 2017.3 is out, and I've had the joy of using it for a few weeks now. Some of my favorite enhancements are the IDE settings sync. If you use more than one computer, I have like an iMac and a MacBook. So
does it work? I saw that feature. I haven't tried it yet, but
it does work. It's a little bit better than the settings repository plugin, which also does the same thing, but occasionally runs into Git conflicts and hard to resolve. But it's so far so good. It's been working for me. It's a new feature. The other thing I like about this version is if you do any TypeScript development and you're writing unit tests for your Karma, unit test for your Angular code, and you're copying and pasting boilerplate code from one test to another, you have to deal with all the importing all those types one by one, and that can take some time. But they fix that, so when you paste, it automatically imports the types for you. So it's some minor optimizations for workflow and a lot of bug fixes, a lot of other improvements. So IDEA 2017.3.
Hey, Ian, just really quick, do you know about Emmet?
No, I don't.
Oh, you guys, man, what the hell, man? All right, here we go. And I know we're going off too long on here, but
you guys are very intrigued though, man.
I know. You can't do that. You have to be like, do you know about Emmet? Oh, too bad you don't. Later.
Later. You guys suck. Ha ha ha. Let's see. Let me come up with a project in here that
give us the download, Daniel. Give us the download.
It isn't. It's part of IntelliJ.
Oh, it's part of IntelliJ.
And it's part of any editor. So if you want to look at Emmet, and maybe this is going to take too long, so let me just tell you this: anything that is web-based, type in div greater than as an example. How about div? Let me rewind. Div hash hello greater than OL greater than sign LI times 3 all in one line, and then hit enter. And then what's going to happen is that all that HTML is going to accordion out, and you just fill in the important parts.
Sounds great. I think I'll look into that.
Yeah. All right. So I got all you webbies all drooling now. Yeah. So go to IntelliJ, or I think you could just go to emmet.io or something like that. How do you
spell it?
I don't know.
Is it EMET?
It is.
Or is it like, isn't that like an Egyptian god, Emmet?
No, not like that.
E-M-M-E-T, right? E-M-M-E-T.
E-M-M-E-T, yeah. So go to docs.emmet, E-M-M-E-T.io.
It was like A-H-M tilde. No, just kidding.
No.
Fascinating.
E-M-M-E-T. And so you could really speed up. And so if you take a look at abbreviations and syntax, you'll see what I'm talking about. And as long as you know the language.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, so there it is. It's like kind of its own small little language. IntelliJ, and I think there's a plugin for Eclipse that, you just say UL greater than LI item $ times 5, and it takes care of your HTML right away. Highly efficient.
Nice, Daniel.
And to tie it all together, That is the Old English for multiple ants.
Emmett?
Yes.
Nice.
Oh man, I like how this podcast just wrapped up.
Nice. Okay. Steve, you had a couple picks.
Yeah, but I'll try to be a good citizen and just stick to one. So
Okay.
I'll think quickly. People should go check out location tech and spatial stuff. I don't think enough Java developers pay attention. But my pick is actually more of a question for your users that I would really, or your listeners that I really like to talk about at some point, or find me at the Steve Zero on Twitter. It's Eclipse Che, which is the newest version of Eclipse. I hear there's this IDE called Eclipse or something that some people use. I'm an IntelliJ fan myself. But Eclipse Che is the new version, and it's web-based. And I poo-poo web-based IDEs all the time. But some people claim it's the bomb, and I really would like to hear more. Like, are developers really excited about a web-based IDE? I myself am not at all.
I've tried Che and on Docker, and I did a Docker run, and it keeps running every time I restart my machine.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah. And it keeps gobbling up my 8080 port in the middle of a presentation. But
Nice.
other than that, it looks pretty cool. I don't.
I know. So I understand that it looks cool, but how many developers are like, "Ooh, that's a problem. I am willing to give up my IntelliJ because I really need a web-based IDE."
Yeah.
For me, people ask me, and I'm like, "You can pry IntelliJ for my cold, dead fingers." Is how I feel about it.
Well, and I mean, I can sort of. I was talking to a prospect once, and they were like, "Hey, are you okay using Eclipse? Is it Che? Chi?
I think it's Che. Yeah.
Like Che Guevara.
Okay." And I'm like, not really. I'm an IntelliJ guy now. I used to be an Eclipse guy. Now I don't want anything to do with it. But I think, and he was fine with that. But I think the benefit for corporations is control, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and the time, every time you add a new developer, they spend like a whole day or two trying to get their workspace set up, trying to get all this crap set up. It's like, so theoretically, if you can ensure also that the stuff is not on their machines, if you've got a proprietary data, like I can see the benefit from an organizational standpoint. From a developer standpoint, I don't know. It would have to be a really good IDE.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the other thing that I really want to find out is, like, as I look at the color of the facial hair of everybody on this podcast, we all seem to be in about the same age range. Like, so I'm also interested about what, like, someone that's just out of like the new developers, is this like, of course I would. Like, that would be the bet. Like, is that something that's coming and I'm just an old fart who's just like, this is my tool and I'm really comfortable with my tool and I'm never going to leave my tool? Yeah. Right. Like, I'm kind of interested about that as well.
I like my typewriter.
Exactly.
So I should say we are on Twitter at intjavanews.com. Oh, no, at intjavanews. So if you got an opinion on that, go ahead and tweet us.
Sure. The first time I heard about web-based IDEs, I was having a conversation with my cousin who's also a developer about my age. And he said, like, I love Mac, but I'm not a fanboy. And actually right now I'm looking at Chromebooks. He wanted to use like a Google Chromebook, just basically a web browser on a tablet, and access his IDE through like some cloud-based IDE. And I thought, what an idea. Like, you have no applications on your development machine at all. Just like a browser with your IDE and your code lives in the cloud. It's like, hey, it could work. I mean, it's kind of liberating in a way.
Yeah, I'm wondering if like that's going to be the future even for me as an instructor and as a presenter, that I fly to a location, not take my laptop unless I really want to, but there's a Chromebook with everything I need, and I could develop on it. I just log into my desktop with all my settings already on there, and I just go. Yeah.
I mean, because I've done that with I don't use Office anymore unless someone forces me to write a Word doc. I basically use Google Docs, right? It's all web-based now. And I love that it's actually all backed up and it's all organized, and I can sync it between multiple machines if I want to. And so I could see why, but for some reason, for me as a developer, there's something about, like, it's all on my laptop. I don't have to be I can be on a plane, I can be anywhere.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, okay, so now I can't work on a plane, because even when I pay for Wi-Fi,
it's crap.
It sucks. It's totally horrible. Yeah. And half the time I just give up. And so I mean, that would be an issue. But then again, browsers, there's very good offline support in browsers now, so it may be possible to do like an IDE that does that really well too. So.
For sure.
All right, moving along. Let's just end our wonderful discussion with some events. You have a few kind of French events. Are you really into? Are you from France, Scott?
No, I'm not French at all. One is the Pousty is Persian, even though it looks like it should be.
Okay.
Like poutine, yeah. Oh, I
love
these. I love these French fries with gravy. Cheese carrots.
My heart stops in exactly 30 seconds after eating it. No, it's Persian. The French events are just because I'm looking for new Java events to do now that I'm back in the space.
Okay.
I thought these were fun events that maybe many of your listeners didn't know about, like
Snow
Camp. Yeah, Snow Camp is in the Alps, so it's like 3 days of conference, and then the last day is group skiing in the Alps.
That's cool.
Right? So that's kind of cool. And then Riviera Dev, it's on the French Riviera. And there's also they're run by Red Hat engineers. They're not Red Hat shows, but the people doing it, like Clément Escoffier, who's the lead on Vertex, or one of the leads on Vertex, helps run Snow Camp. And then Stéphane Epard, who I think is on JDG, or Infinispan, is one of the ones who runs Riviera Dev.
Okay.
So I just thought I'd put those in because many, if you're looking for an excuse to go to France and have your work pay for it, that would be cool.
Good deal. So that's
and they're smaller. They're smaller. I like small shows because you actually get to. That's what I like about like the No Fluff Just Stuff and the Read Write. It's like a small show and you can interact.
All right.
Yeah, that's nice. So so Snow Camp is January 24th, 27th, and in Alps, France, Riviera Day is May 16th to 18th. Also, NG Europe is February 1st to 2nd in Paris. And Dev Nexus, which I'll be speaking at again, which I'm looking forward to, is
I will as well.
Yeah, 21st to 23rd in Atlanta. Woohoo! We'll have a party.
Exactly, Ian, get there.
Yes, you should.
I would
speak
love
at Dev
to.
Nexus. Of course.
Yeah, I got to work on that.
Coffee Papers is over, but you can just come and hang out.
It sounds tempting.
All right, cool.
We're due for a hangout.
Yeah, we are indeed.
And so No Fluff Just Stuff, Madison, 23rd, 24th, Minneapolis, March 2nd to 4th, Boston, March 16th through 18th, St. Louis, April 6th and 7th, and I'll stop here at Reston, April 20th and 22nd.
Okay, why does Jay pick freaking cold places in February and March to do I was like, oh, maybe that'll be fun. No, that won't be fun to go to talk at. I'm not going. Forget that. Madison and Minneapolis in the worst time. That's the worst time of the year.
That is a little strange.
Yeah,
and even Boston in March probably isn't that great.
Yeah, no.
You know what? I'm thinking hotels are cheap. I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know.
Right.
I think might be it, dude.
Yeah, and none of the developers get to go anywhere, right? Like they're all stuck. There's not
and we feel sorry for those who are burdened by their own weather. Yeah, so we're like,
yeah.
Okay. That could be it.
Maybe that's a guess. Cool. All right.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for hanging out with us and offering us the Gospel of Docker.
Thank you.
And containers.
Thank you.
Appreciate
this
it.
was a ton of fun, and I warned you. Freewheeling was never a problem.
Right.
Yeah. So you can always find the latest show notes at enterprisejavanews.com. And if you haven't been there in a while, we actually moved the whole thing to Libsyn, and it looks better and more modern and more podcast friendly. So please check it out.
Yep. I subscribe to you guys through Pocket Casts. So you're also, for those Android users who can't use iTunes, there's my favorite podcast app. Oh, I should have put this in my picks section. Sorry. Pocket Casts is a great Android app for podcasts. And you guys are in there. I searched for Java, and you guys came up.
Great
deal.
All right, excellent.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, and
all right.
We will see you guys in a month or so.
All right. See ya.
Yes. Happy holidays, everyone, and happy New Year. We'll see you in 2018.
Yep.
All right,
happy holidays.